Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Okay, welcome back to the Gay Buddhist Fellowship, and I'll give the word to Jen.
You're not going to do the name thing. You caught me off guard. See, habit of mind.
Thank you, appreciate that. My name is Paul.
Mike.
Jim.
Patrick.
Don. Country Georgia.
Michael.
Mark.
Oh.
Kay. George. Marty.
Michael.
Joe.
Michael. Mark.
Jack. Gary.
Dan. Peter. Stephen. Bob.
Clint.
Snake.
Howard.
Lisa. David.
Okay, I feel better now. So, thank you for coming on Cinco de Mayo. So, welcome. And do people have any questions on Dharma questions or on their practice? They've been coming up over the last month since I last saw you. It's wonderful, such clarity. I have a handout. So last month I passed this out, but there are a lot of people here who were here last month. So one of the things that's happening to the Dharma here in the United States, that's it both has great potential and it's also a source of some stress for Western Dharma practitioners or American Dharma practitioners. And that is that all the different streams of the Dharma are pouring into the United States and setting up shop here, like it's right next door to each other. And so one of the really interesting things about the Gay Buddhist Fellowship is that there are all these people here, some of us are Theravada practitioners, some of us are Zen practitioners, some of us are Gelug practitioners. I'm making an assumption that that's your... What? Kagyu. Okay, excuse me. But there are some Gelug practitioners. And Nichiren practitioners. It's... the situation can be really confusing to, especially to beginners. But not only to beginners. It's like even after you've studied the Dharma for maybe 5 years or even 10 years, then all of a sudden you'll bump into somebody who has a completely different take on the Dharma and how to interpret it. And so what I like to do is to try and return to what I call the core, what I think of as the core teachings of the Dharma, sort of returning to the source or the seed of the Dharma. Things like the Four Noble Truths, things like dependent origination, things that all the different visions of the Dharma share. And one of the things they share is a certain view about ethics. And the core of Buddhist ethics is contained in the 5 precepts of the Dharma. It's the Buddha considered ethical training as a basis for any further development in the Dharma. So it's not difficult to understand why. If your mind is agitated and say set on harming other people, the idea that you could calm your mind in meditation while your mind is also actively involved in that kind of activity, it's not going to work. It's not. It would be extraordinarily difficult. So a good ethical foundation, or a strong ethical foundation, is basic for further development in the Dharma. How many people were not here last month when I started? Okay, well then I'll just start at the beginning and I hope I can make it through the whole thing. So the core of the precepts are the 5 precepts, and when I say they're the core, is various Dharma traditions and manifestations have added on to these, but these 5 precepts are shared by all traditions of the Dharma. The 5 precepts are the way in which, in many Buddhist traditions, someone becomes a Buddhist by taking these 5 precepts. So, but there's various ways of looking at the precepts, and there's various ways they've been interpreted in different traditions. And so the first way of interpreting that I have listed here is what I call from the perspective of restraint. That the purpose of ethical precepts is to restrain our behavior from going in certain directions. It's that the fourth noble truth of the Buddha is the truth of the path. So if you think of taking the Dharma as taking a path, you can also think of that as like a fork in the road. Like you make a conscious decision that I'm going to go down that road. The restraining aspect of the precepts is that I'm not going to go on that other fork. Like I'm restraining myself from going down that path. Like the second aspect, the perspective of the path, is that I am going to go down this path. Like so, both of them are simultaneously present. But in order to follow the path of the Dharma, you have to make like a conscious decision that I'm not going to go in this direction. I'm going to go in that direction. So the most common way one hears about the precepts is from the perspective of restraint. So I undertake the rule of training to refrain from harming living beings. I undertake the rule of training. It's like rule of training is an interesting way of putting it. It brings to mind things like sports or music, something like that. So the Dharma is a kind of training or a cultivation of certain states of mind and heart, like certain understandings, certain realizations. So I undertake the rule of training to refrain from harming living beings is rooted in the primal insight of the Buddha into the dependent origination of all phenomena. So the reason that we refrain from harming living beings is because we are intimately connected to all living beings. Other living beings are not separate from us. So that's the origin of that view, of that understanding. I undertake the rule of training to refrain from taking what is not given. Like once again, like if your mind is strategizing on how to acquire things that are not your due, very difficult to reach a state of calm, to reach a state of insight, to reach a state of inquiry. The mind would be agitated. So if you're involved in taking what is not given, then your mind also has to be involved in covering up that strategy. So once again, that takes a great deal of psychic energy and mental drains the mind. Just from the perspective of one's own cultivation, one's clarity, refrain from taking what is not given. It's also this precept also has its origin in the primal insight of the interdependence of all things. That is to say, the life of a person does not end at their skin. So beings are extended into the world. So anyone who's ever been robbed has an experience of being almost physically assaulted. It's very interesting. You come home and your apartment's been robbed. It's almost like you've been physically beaten up. But there's a reason for that. It's because our life in the world is not confined to our physical body. So taking what is not given is, in a sense, a kind of a physical assault. Like, so, in a sense, you can see that the second precept is an extension of the first one, to do no harm to others. And the third precept is, I undertake the rule of training to refrain from sexual misconduct. Sexual misconduct means sexual conduct that harms oneself or others. It's the same insight applied to this specific dimension. In a way, you can see that the first precept is the precept. And all the other precepts, including the 233 precepts of a monk, are specific applications of that first insight. And the fourth one is, I undertake the rule of training to refrain from deceptive speech. So I love this. I love that old saying. The great thing about telling the truth is you don't have to remember what you said. Once again, from the perspective of the agitation of one's mind, refraining from deceptive speech allows the mind to become settled and clear. Not just when one meditates, but every day in one's interaction. Speaking without deception is a kind of meditation, in the sense that it grants clarity to the mind. And I undertake the rule of training to refrain from intoxicants. So intoxicants cloud the mind. In the Vinaya, the origin of this precept is that there were some monks very early in the history of the Sangha who were drinking and disrupting the practice of those who were meditating. So, people who are drinking are oblivious. So, walking into the room, just walking into the area where the monks are meditating. So that was the specific incident which gave rise to this precept. But also, I think the Buddha was very concerned about the consequences of people's activities, ordinary activities. Intoxicants which cloud the mind lead to activities which are disharmonious and have negative effects and produce negative karma. And generally they create a great deal of social agitation. It's interesting about the actual fifth precept was a prohibition on alcohol. And some modern commentators, extend that to intoxicants in general, but the Buddha was specifically concerned with alcohol. He didn't have modern chemistry to extend this to deal with. But if you look at the effect of alcohol on one's own life and the lives of one's friends, it's really a question about whether or not alcohol has produced any benefits in this world. If you balance it. This is a tough one because people like alcohol and they like the social lubrication that alcohol gives. But the downside is really quite extreme, and that is what the Buddha was addressing in this fifth precept. So are there questions on this first level of restraint?
Well, yeah. Just a small point. About the idea of eliminating intoxicants and saying, alcohol probably more a curse than a blessing. I would just maybe take it one step further. The need to take some kind of stimulant is the curse, not alcohol. It's like if there weren't any alcohol, some ingenious little monkey mind would come up with some other.
Absolutely. And that's the problem in general with this level of the precepts, because life is more complicated than a system of restraints can encompass. That doesn't mean that they're useless. But you need to get to the spirit of them. Because I mentioned last month, human beings are very clever at getting around prohibitions. I undertake the rule of training to refrain from taking what is not given. Yeah, right. Well, if I'm starving or if my kids are starving, then you raise all these situations, right? And then the human mind is very clever at plunging into the grays of existence, especially in the realm of ethics. And so given any one of these precepts, you could come up with a situation where, say, compassion would override like the keeping of these precepts. My own teacher loved to do this to people at precept ceremony. He would, the precepts ceremonies usually had 50 or 60 people, and they were done on the Buddha's birthday or his enlightenment day, and people would come up and they'd take the precepts collectively, but then they would come up individually to receive this document, like that listed the precepts and that he had transmitted them to you on this day. And then just as he was handing somebody the precepts, he'd give them a paradox. It's like, he'd say, you're on a ship and it sinks. Like there's one lifeboat and there's 8 people, but there's only room for 5 in the lifeboat. What can you do? And you go like, of course you're in front of all these people, right? Which he knew, and they go, and he'd say, know when to keep the precepts and know when to break them, so, which is very good advice. It's actually very sound advice. So, from a Buddhist perspective, the precepts are a guide. They are guides, and as guides, they are very useful, but they also have their limitations, which is why we move on to the second level of understanding the precepts. And this is from the perspective of the path. So the first is from the perspective of restraint. I'm not going to go that way. I'm going to, turn my life in a way that's consistent with the Fourth Noble Truth, and the Eightfold Path. So interpreting the first precept from the perspective of the path, I undertake the rule of training to live in the sacred web of life, is a way of expressing the primal insight of the Buddha of the interdependence of all things. So it's that is, I will follow this path to consciously and deepen my understanding of the interconnectedness of all things, the dependent origination of all things. So that's the path I'm going to take, because that is the actual way that things exist. And just as the first precept, from the perspective of restraint, is the precept, and the rest of them are specific applications. From the perspective of the path, the first precept is the precept, and all the others are applications of that, understanding. So I undertake the rule of training to respect other people's things. For example, returning a book that is borrowed. That's a big one for me. I have an agitation about that. I can't count the number of books that I've loaned out that haven't come back. So, but respecting other people's things, is an application of understanding the interdependence of all things. And I undertake the rule of training to use sexuality in a sacred manner. So that means comprehending that when engaged in sexual behavior, that there is another person present. That's minimal. That's the minimal level. And that's also true for solo sex. Realizing that you are present. And it's also true for celibacy. That celibacy should be engaged in for the benefit of other people. For the benefit of other people. And when celibacy is engaged in as a gift for other people, then it's consistent with this precept, both in terms of restraint and in terms of the path. I undertake the rule of training to speak truthfully. So when you speak truthfully, you honor the presence of that other person. You honor not only the presence of that other person, you honor your own person. And you honor words. So words are kind of a tool. When you speak untruthfully or deceptively, it's like trying to saw a log by using a hammer. You're not treating the tools with respect. You're not treating the tools correctly. So if you think of words as a kind of a tool or a way of connecting with other people and with existence, speaking truthfully is is honoring those tools which we call words. And I undertake the rule of training to remain focused and clear. Good one, huh? So if you can do that, you've made it. Undertaking the rule of training to remain focused and clear. So I will be present. I will be present. I will be, aware. I will have equanimity at appearances as they arise. All of that is striving for clarity. Clarity is the basis of understanding. So the removal of ignorance. So are there questions or comments on the second level from the perspective of the path? Yes?
I wonder if we could go back to the first. I was wondering about the very first one. Particularly in terms of practicing loving kindness. Does that extend to annoying insects? I've always seen that as just kind of a thing I hadn't thought of, but I know Hindus go as far as straining teeth. Is it all about the interconnectedness, and should that be respected?
Actually, that's Jains, who will, wear a mask so they won't breathe in an insect and strain their water. Although there's some indications in the Vinaya that early followers of the Buddha also engaged in that kind of activity. But yes, it does. Extending loving kindness to annoying insects is definitely a part, say, of the four immeasurables, for example, so. But clarity, the purpose of extending loving kindness is not to pretend that something that is annoying is not annoying. Okay. So, for example, say you're at the drugstore, and somebody cuts in line in front of you, so that's annoying behavior. That's irritating behavior. Nevertheless, you extend loving kindness to that person. It's not that you extend loving kindness to deny that their behavior is annoying and self-centered. It's like the reason you extend loving kindness to them is in the hope that they will overcome their self-centered and annoying behavior. It's like may you be well and happy. May you be free from suffering. Obviously, they are suffering if they feel that they have to engage in that kind of activity. So, the Dalai Lama was once asked what he would do if a mosquito landed on him, and he said, "I'd swat it." You also have to extend loving kindness and compassion toward yourself, and to realize that the world is complicated, and that sometimes we have to engage in activities that we may be reluctant to engage in, but nevertheless we have to do them. And if we have clarity about that, then we can proceed without confusion. Does that make sense? Okay. Are there other questions?
Well, I think I might have brought this example before, but I remember there's some of this ethical situation with Gandhi and his ashram that he lived in about monkeys raiding the fruit trees to report the food source for the people, and you couldn't scare the monkeys away because the monkeys knew that there wouldn't be any follow through on it. They would bang pots and stuff like that. The monkeys eventually would just ignore them. So they made it. And Gandhi was so much for the sanctity of life, but they made a conscious decision that they had to kill a couple of monkeys in order to scare the rest of the monkeys away to save its food source. So they did it, but it was a very conscious decision, and when I did it, it wasn't done out of anger or wasn't like a real knee-jerk response. And I just was thinking about that when you talked about that.
There are many examples like that that occur in life. So the third level is from the perspective of cultivation, and what's being cultivated here is heart wisdom, and basically it's if you extend the precepts through that sense of interconnectedness, what emerges is the immeasurables. I've slightly modified them. I've added a fifth because everything is in fives here, but But the idea is clear. So from the perspective of cultivation, I undertake the cultivation of immeasurable love. Why? Because I am not separate from other living beings. That's why I undertake the rule of training to refrain from harming living beings. That's why I undertake the rule of training to live in the sacred web of life. So cultivation is, like if you think of the Dharma as a path, and I've taken these first steps down the path. The first step is restraint. I'm not going to go that way. The second step is I want to live this way. And then to go farther down the path, cultivation of understanding is necessary. So immeasurable love means wishing that all beings be well and happy. I undertake the cultivation of immeasurable gratitude. That is, I become aware of what all beings have done for me. So we spend a great deal of time being aware of what all beings have done to me. So this is to balance, balance that. So I undertake the rule of training to refrain from taking what is not given. How do I actualize that? By becoming aware of all that has been given to me, all that has been gifted to me. That's the connection. That's the cultivation of immeasurable gratitude. I undertake the cultivation of immeasurable sympathetic joy, which is delight in other people's accomplishments. So that's becoming aware of other people's good qualities, aware of other people's Buddha nature, aware of all that they've contributed. When I'm in that awareness, all forms of intercommunication, including sexual activity, become a field for exploring the interconnectedness of all things. I undertake the cultivation of immeasurable compassion, wishing that all beings be free from suffering. So, applying that to speech, deceptive speech is not compassionate speech. Truthful speech is compassionate speech. That's the connection. I give voice to compassion by speaking truthfully. I undertake the cultivation of immeasurable equanimity, resting in immeasurable acceptance for all appearances as they arise. Why? Because all appearances are marked by Buddha nature. All appearances are marked by emptiness. All appearances are an occasion for realization. So understanding that, clarity arises, and I can rest in immeasurable equanimity and acceptance of all that is. So that's nice, huh? That's pretty good. Are there questions on this level of the precepts? Comments? And then this is from the fourth level is from the perspective of vow. So this is a turning of the mind, which is called bodhicitta. Now I've gone a certain distance down the path, and it suddenly occurs to me there are other beings there who can't see the path, or don't know about the path, or are lost in ignorance. And so there's a turning of the mind, sort of looking back and reaching out to other sentient beings. Those sentient beings are suffering the way I once suffered. Those sentient beings are also, mired in ignorance, anger, greed, and delusion. And so the precepts blossom into this sense of bodhicitta, of this turning of the mind. So many of you are familiar with these. So sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Why? It's because sentient beings and I are not separate. So that's the core realization of the first precept. So fully realizing that after the cultivation of immeasurable heart wisdom, bodhicitta arises. Yes, concern for other beings begins to manifest.
What is the content of save? What is that all about?
what is that all about?
Well, I mean, I understand not causing harm to other beings, but I'm not sure what saving them is.
My understanding of what it means to save sentient beings is rooted in the Diamond Sutra. So the opening of the Diamond Sutra, Subhuti asks the Buddha, how should a bodhisattva course in this world? How should a bodhisattva stand in this world? How should a bodhisattva move in this world? And the Buddha responds by saying that the bodhisattva should take a vow to save all sentient beings from suffering, while simultaneously realizing that there is no such thing as a sentient being. And so how to understand? I mean, that looks initially like a terrible paradox. So saving sentient beings, a being means, in a Buddhist context, a being means a separately existing being, an isolated being, a self-sufficient being. So saving sentient beings is demonstrating to them, clarifying to them that they do not exist separately and therefore are not a being. And that's what saving them means. But in the Diamond Sutra, the Buddha speaks in this way because if you initially approach people with the understanding, with an ultimate understanding that they do not exist separately, that they are not in fact beings, that's just confusion. It can often give rise to anger. Well, you may not be separately existing, buddy, but I am. So you need to begin at the beginning, say with the 5 precepts, or the First Noble Truth, making them aware of their suffering. But at some point, the realization has to dawn is that I am not a separately existing being, which means, in a Buddhist context, it means I'm not a being. And that's why in the Diamond Sutra it goes back and forth between those kinds of assertions and denials and assertions and denials. Is that helpful? Or
Yes.
Okay. And then there's let's see, where did I leave off? I'm sorry. Number 2, thank you. The hindrances are inexhaustible. I vow to extinguish them all. So one of the chief hindrances is greed and clinging. Greed gives rise is the root cause for taking what is not given. So extending that into a context of heart wisdom and the arisal of bodhicitta, I overcome all hindrances, not just that one specific hindrances, but all hindrances to understanding. The teachings are innumerable. I vow to learn them all. So that's what I call this unpacking the meaning of the Dharma. So lately I've begun to see some of the teachings of the Buddha, I refer to them as liberative gnosis, liberating understanding. But the reason I use the word gnosis is because understanding is too small. I understand how to drive from Sonoma to San Francisco, for example. But gnosis, I'm using the word gnosis in the sense of an understanding that kind of reverberates and awakens one. So the analogy I like to use is, if I think the world is flat, that affects my view of existence. That affects what I think is possible in this world. When I learn that the world is round, even if I'm not Magellan and hop on a ship and go around the world, it still strongly affects my view of existence. The teaching of dependent origination is much more pervasive than that. The teachings are innumerable. I vow to learn them all. So the Buddha taught all things arise dependently due to causes and conditions. All things in existence are causes and conditions for other things to arise. Like so. So if you allow that understanding to deeply enter into your mind and your heart, it reverberates. And if you allow yourself to unpack that understanding and say, how does it apply here? Where does it apply there? Given that that's the case, what does it mean? In many different areas, it has a profoundly transformative effect. That just unpacking the meaning of that is a kind of analytical meditation in and of itself. So that learning the teachings of the Buddha can be profoundly transformative, and a kind of meditation in itself. So the way of the Bodhisattva is unattainable. I vow to attain it. So the way of the Bodhisattva emerges from a profound understanding of the interconnectedness of all things. It's unattainable because that's our actual nature. That's our actual nature. It is attainable in the sense that even though it's my actual nature, I'm not aware of it. So both are true. Both are true. At one level, it's attainable because I'm kind of dumb and slow. I'm a plotter. So the awareness of that truth becomes clearer and clearer. It's unattainable in the sense that it was never not true. It's unattainable in the sense that it's not a truth that I acquire. It's not a talent that I acquire. It's something that I become progressively aware of. I like to say that sometimes I compare that understanding to all human beings have musician nature. All human beings have musician nature, but not all human beings are musicians. That is all. With the exception of a few people who are born, say, deaf or something like that. All human beings have the capacity, to become musicians. And if they decide to follow that path to musicianship, then that will be actualized. So the analogy I'm making is that all sentient beings have Buddha nature. But not all sentient beings are Buddhas. They have not fully realized that. Does that make sense? Or I don't know. And the way of the Buddha is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. So, why do I vow to become a fully realized Buddha? So, because that is the best way that I can help other suffering sentient beings. There's no clear way.
Can you make a distinction between 4 and 5? It seemed to me to be very similar.
There's not much of a distinction. It's just a slightly different emphasis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Originally 4 vows, right? And you
Right.
did 2 in translation.
Right. I had to make everything into 5 because he started out with the 5 precepts. That's basically it. It's just a little editorial slip.
I'm sorry about my presentation.
Other questions? Okay. So, and then the 5th level, because there's 5, is from the ultimate perspective. So the ultimate perspective means from the perspective of nirvana. Yes. So from the perspective of complete realization. Complete realization means from the perspective of the deathless, the unborn, the constant. So that's what nirvana means. So I will. The first one is I will always reside in the presence of the deathless and the unborn. So, that's true. So what is the deathless and the unborn? So the most frequent synonyms for nirvana that the Buddha uses in the discourses are the deathless, and the non-clinging. Or sometimes he uses a wonderful term called the non-adhesive, like so, which I just love. Like so, it's a wonderful description of non-clinging. Like so, but so as my journey down the path, continues, I become aware of the presence of the constant, the presence of the deathless. That is a profoundly liberative glimpse. A fully realized Buddha is in that presence constantly in the constant. But even a slight glimpse of that reality is profoundly transforming. It's very. The second one is I will awaken to the no-boundary nature of all things. So, given the interconnectedness of all things, when I was talking about the second precept at the first level, refrain from taking what is not given. And I mentioned that one of the reasons we do that is because people are not confined to their physical body. Their presence in the world is extended beyond that. So where one draws a boundary between things is a habit of mind. It's a habit of mind. So let me give you an example. So given a table, the table has a certain function. So the human habit of mind is sees that object and perceives the table. A dog perceives the table and sees something different. Sees what I call a piss post. Potential. A termite sees a table and sees a whole realm. So it's really gobble gobble. But you can really understand this is if the table breaks. See, for the human being, the basis of designation is gone. So, and the table no longer exists. Impermanence manifests. For the termite, it doesn't make any difference. The realm may have changed its geography. Maybe it's the termite equivalent of an earthquake. But the basis of designation has not altered. It's very interesting that if you live with a dog, you can observe this because when strangers approach your dwelling, a dog will bark. There's a certain signal in a dog's consciousness. What's being signaled is a certain basis of canine designation is being crossed. We're not always clear about what that is. We have a vague understanding, of what it is. But they see an object, they perceive an object, where we do not necessarily perceive an object, and so they react. That's a good example, that you can observe every day. So the no boundary nature of all things is withdrawing those projections, and perceiving things in their original purity, which is their original interconnectedness, Indra's net. So I will actualize the great peace of nirvana. So that's another very common expression of the Buddha. Nirvana is peace. Nirvana is peace. So if you think of the first level of the precepts, one of the primary purposes of them is to decrease the agitation of the mind. So if you think of nirvana as the absence of that agitation, that constant grasping, that constant strategizing, then nirvana is peace. Understand that. Or if you understand nirvana as non-clinging, then nirvana as peace becomes clear. So the example I frequently use here, and some of you have heard this before, is the striking a bell. The sound of the bell emerges. The sound of the bell ceases. That mind which does not cling to the sound of the bell when the sound of the bell ceases that mind is peace. That's the peace the Buddha is talking about. So that is equanimity, and that's the spaciousness, that we are referring to. See, it's interesting about clinging or adhesiveness. Clinging and adhesiveness are not equally distributed over the 6 sense bases. The human capacity for clinging is primarily concentrated in visual formations and mental formations. There's not much clinging for human beings in the sonic realm. Very, very little clinging in the olfactory realm, and so etc. That's why, for example, in the Shurangama Sutra, it says that the easiest way to access the state of realization is through sound. And so it's by paying attention, by shifting one's attention to the sonic realm. Because we have that experience fairly repeatedly of non-clinging and peace in the sonic dimension. But it's necessary to recognize that, see? It's necessary to point out that experience and recognize it. Oh, that's what he meant. Now I understand, what he's referring to. I will remain in the awareness that all things speak of liberation. So all, the Heart Sutra says all things are marked by emptiness. All things are marked by emptiness. All things are marked by emptiness because all things are dependently arising occasions. Because all things are marked by emptiness, everything that appears is an opportunity for practice and realization. That's not always clear. And we need to be compassionate for ourselves, especially at the beginning of practice. Although that is theoretically possible, in actuality it's probably not possible. So in terms of the path, though, that becomes clearer and clearer and clearer. It's like somebody asked me about an annoying person, or annoying insect. But let's talk about annoying people. They're similar. But if an annoying person appears, that's an opportunity to observe our mind, to observe our like and dislike mind, our grasping mind, our judgmental mind, and to let that go in the spaciousness that is our true self. And so I've mentioned this several times before, but I've developed a practice at work that I call Secret Bodhisattva, and I like to tell people about it because you can use it. So it's like when I work in retail, which is a wonderful region for this kind of practice. So somebody comes into the bookstore, wants to order a book. I'm sorry, it's out of print. What do you mean it's out of print? I want it. So that kind of response is then arising in my mind is that I say to myself, Secret Bodhisattva. What that person is Manjushri standing in front of me, teaching me that I have to practice harder. That there is a spaciousness in my mind, and that's why they're actually there. They aren't actually there to annoy me; they're there to teach me. And it's wonderful. It's a wonderful practice. I have a Jewish friend. His name is Lawrence. I have to digress for a moment, but he's an Orthodox Jew, and we have wonderful discussions about whether or not God exists, for example. And I told him one day about this practice because he also works in a bookstore, and he cracked up because he developed a practice where if an annoying customer appears, he says to himself, "In the image of God." That's what arises in his mind. He goes, in the image of God. So we've had wonderful discussions about how that. So I just wanted to tell you that story because it's very. I found it delightful. So the fifth one is, I will dwell on the realization that all things are clear, open, and spacious. All things are clear, open, and spacious. One of the characteristics of the unenlightened mind is a kind of claustrophobia. kind of claustrophobia. It's like, I have no options. I can't bear it. The universe is crushing me. Like it's out to get me. Those kinds of paranoia and claustrophobia. And one of the benefits of meditation is you begin to experience that, the mind is not a claustrophobic chamber. The mind is vast and spacious. No matter how much you practice, no matter how much meditation you do, you will never find the end or the limit to the mind and the heart. It's that vast, and that vastness is our true nature. And so there is space to grow. There is space to blossom. There is space and time for the manifestation of wisdom and compassion.
On that note.
Oh,
Yes.
closing question. Thank you very much.
Do anybody have any announcement? Yes.
I have 2 Sutra Salons. So the Sutra study groups. One meets in San Francisco, one meets in the East Bay. They meet once a month, and if you're interested, see me afterwards.
Yes. Welcome everybody who's here for the first time today, and just to remind people that we have the Dharma wall on the table outside. Sure.
All right, thank you. Yes, David.
Also, there's a steering committee meeting after this, I guess after our social time, come back and have probably a brief meeting, I imagine.
Yes.
A reminder that this talk and selected others are now available at the GBF website at gaybuddhist.org.
Thank you. And I just have to close because you have to be very generous with your contribution on the Dharma ball. $5 is suggested, but if you don't have the money, don't pay anything. If you have lots, and Greg, he bought a very, very beautiful pastry from a Danish pastry bakery somewhere over there, and it's delicious. It costs a lot of money, so dump those money in that Dharma ball. All right? Thank you. Okay, will you close?
May all sentient existence be well and happy. May all sentient existence be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May good fortune fill all the days of all the lives of all sentient existence. May all sentient existence dwell forever in the limitless realm of the ever-present peaceful heart and serene mind. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.